So let's begin. I was very taken with Teresa Berger's observation that we live with many different calendars. Can you see her the other day? I love that during the hymn festival, she was stacking all those calendars on the ambo in that wonderful, irreligious way that Teresa has. I love it. I want to build on her insight and say we live not only different calendars, we also live with different modes of time that often work simultaneously in our lives. To introduce the reality of multiple modes of time, I begin with a poem and then the story that lies behind the poem, and it will quickly become evident how this relates to the week. The poem is First the Wind Upon the Water. First, the wind upon the water as the formless sea is stirred, then the source and core of being speaks the potent primal word. Let there be light. Let there be sky. Let there be land and living things, each according to its kind, having fins or hoofs or wings. Let the multitude of images in all your creatures shine with the hidden holy likeness of the one who is divine. First, the gathering of matter in explosive densities, whose compacted masses scatter through the vast immensities. Then waves of light that strike the earth, and rains and winds and thunderstorms turn the dust we share with stars to a host of living forms. Thus the generating processes of atoms, suns, and cells waken that same sense of wonder that the ancient scripture tells. First, the wind upon the water. First, the starry cosmic flame, then the word of the Creator working in the human frame. Let there be love. Let there be grace. Let health and peace and justice rise. Let your science feed your faith and your knowledge make you wise. Center all your aims and purposes on what this world displays. The source and core of being calls for everlasting praise. The poem I just read was commissioned by a church that had installed a new stained glass window. It featured images of the cosmos. The Big Bang and explosions of supernovas were interwoven with images drawn from the creation stories in Genesis. It was a congregation with many scientific thinkers. They did not take Genesis literally, but they had a great appreciation for its poetic spiritual depth. They interpreted the creation stories as myths, expressing important insights about the meaning and purpose of life. They commissioned me to provide an anthem text, soprano, alto, tenor, bass anthem text, to be set by a composer that their choir could sing at the dedication of the window. The commission clearly stated the anthem must blend the Genesis creation myths with the theory of the Big Bang and the way life evolved on this planet. I begin with the poem and the story behind it because it introduces us to three different modes of time that were manifest in our congregational projects. There were more than three, but three is enough for one presentation. Here are the three modes that are present in the poem and that were clearly evident in our work this week. Cosmic time. No, I did not consult with worship people. That's wonderful. Cosmic time, ordered time, creaturely time. Cosmic time, ordered time, creaturely time. It may be that your project deals with all three, although in most cases, one mode of time tends to dominate more than the others. Cosmic time. First, the gathering of matter in explosive densities. Ordered time. First, the wind upon the water as the formless sea is stirred. Creaturely time. Let there be land and living things, each according to its kind, having fins or hoofs or wings. And finally, the convergence of all three modes in the ultimate purpose of existence. The source and core of being calls for everlasting praise. Each of your churches is developing a project to bring at least one mode of time into greater harmony with the source and core of being, the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the eternal spring of time and being, the everlasting God. I will now look separately at each of these three modes of time. In doing this, I will draw upon your projects. I'm going to be quoting many of you, comments from our conversations, the articles we were sent prior to our meeting, and various scholars and authors I met in doing research to get ready for this week. When I'm finished, you will have time in a small group to discuss a worksheet designed to help you pull the week together. That's in your packet. I'll give you directions at the end. Before turning to cosmic time, I want to remind us of how elusive time is, a warning given both by St. Augustine and St. Saliers. I like it. It's the same Bible. I like the way the contemporary Australian theologian Gideon Goosen puts the matter in his recent book, Space, Time, and Theology in Dialogue. Remember, this will be on, all these references will be there. I'm quoting from Goosen now. Listen to this careful analysis of how the word time is used in our language. Quote, we apply different verbs to time. Have, use, kill, need, make, buy, reverse, fill, waste, save, spend, run out of. We use different prepositions with time. In, over, on, with, from, through, beyond, before. We also use it as a substantive. Good times, ancient modern times. Happier times, hard times. The march of time, the time of our lives. Time on your hands, in the nick of time. No time, and doing time. I think it's a brilliant little paragraph that really helps you see immediately some of those things Augustine and Saliers were getting at in terms of the complexity. I turn to cosmological time. In recent years, I've been impressed by how science has demonstrated the interconnectivity of the universe. Quote, humanity is related inextricably to all reality, known and unknowable. Plankton, the shimmering phosphorescence of the sea, and the spinning planets, and an expanding universe, all bound together by the elastic string of time. It's advisable to look from the tide pool to the stars, and then back to the tide pool again, into the quote. Those words are from John Steinbeck, cited approvingly by the great astrophysicist Martin Rees in his book, Just Six Numbers, The Deep Forces That Shape the Universe. That elastic string of time is the string that stretches back 13.7 billion years to the Big Bang. It has taken that long for us to get to the current moment, 13.7 billion years. This is worthy of a sermon to help frame ecology. I'll do just a very brief one for you. I want you to imagine that it is Thanksgiving Day, and this is the sermon that I would preach. I would say to people, I know that many of you will go home and you'll be stuffing your turkey. I want you to imagine somebody's in the kitchen, the family's there, and they are pouring the cubed bread into a bowl to mix up. Somebody else comes in and they've got a camera. Maybe they're doing it on their iPhone, but they want to make a movie of it. So they're making the movie. All of a sudden, the movie starts backwards. And the cubes come up out of the bowl and they go into the box. And the box is resealed. And the person walks backwards into the closet and puts the box up on the shelf. Then the next day, you see somebody taking it off the shelf, putting it in a grocery bag, and walking backwards to their car. Then the car drives backwards to the grocery market. And they go back and they put it on the shelf. And then you see somebody who had put it there, take it off the shelf, take it back, and take it back to the storage room. And then it's put on a truck. And it's taken back to the processing factory where it was. And then you see the cubes dissolve into grain. And then they become wheat. And then there's the truck that drives back to the farm. And then you see these wheat stems going down into the ground. And you see them going again and again until you get back to the very first wheat. And then you see the earth covered entirely with ocean. And then the earth comes apart and it goes back. And it goes back to the sun. And then it goes back to the moment before the Big Bang. And you think, my God, God's been in the kitchen 13.7 billion years. Making our Thanksgiving dinner. We need to be preaching like Don't just say be grateful. Give people an experience that makes them grateful. That's why we enter cosmological time. Goosen observes, quote, "The whole ecological movement draws attention to where we are in this cosmos, the place we inherit on Earth and how we interconnect with all on this planet. We are now more cosmologically conscious, that is, conscious of our place in the cosmos as creatures, as part of the material world come to consciousness after billions of years since the Big Bang. We also know that the modern humans emerged only about 120,000 years ago, which is analogous to a minute to midnight if the history of the cosmos is represented by 24 hours. I think that's a very helpful metaphor for you to remember, okay? Think of the span of time, the 13.7 billion years, 24 hours. We came on the scene, that is our ancestors, 120,000 years ago, 1 minute before midnight. It does something to your sense of time, doesn't it? Here is one of the great gifts of cosmological time. It puts in scientific perspective the astounding wonder and fragility of this little whirling watered stone on which we live. How do we communicate that sense of time to people who live from paycheck to paycheck if they are employed, or from soup kitchen to soup kitchen if they are impoverished? I believe it takes a new theopoetic. That's what I just gave you in that little hum. The term theopoetic comes from the theologian Amos Wilder, lived from 1895 to 1993, was a graduate of this school. Wilder coined the term theopoetic to describe imaginative theological language that is congruent with how we picture and understand the material world. The word is a hybrid of two others. Theo comes from theos, meaning God in Greek. Wilder joins this with the word poetic to give us theopoetic, a word he uses as both an adjective and noun. When I use the phrase theopoetic language, I am referring to both verbal and non-verbal forms of expression. We had a stunning example of theopoetic language in that playing of the Messiaen today. I don't know who was doing that. It was so beautiful. Thank you so deeply. It's really gorgeous. We need let me give you another example. The organic garden of Trinity Presbyterian Church in Denton, Texas, and their desire to be certified as an earth care congregation are forms of theopoetic expression about cosmic time. We need a theopoetic language for preaching and liturgy, a theopoetic language that employs the insights of science and the visionary imagination of church. Just think of that church with the stained glass window with both evolution and Big Bang and Genesis all together. If we lack this theopoetic idiom, our attempt to engage the eco-crisis may be too limited to a recital of the facts and the needs for action. Those belong in sermons and in church, but they are not in themselves adequate to engage the human heart to do what we've got to do. H. Paul Santmeyer, in his book, Ritualizing Nature, Renewing Christian Liturgy in a Time of Crisis, and all of you who are working on this ecological thing, but especially the church in Memphis, I would urge you to get that book. It's really fun. Santmeyer observes that the history of connections between liturgy and nature in Christian theology and practice has been checkered at best, including the 20th century. He gives you examples where it's been very well done, and he gives you examples where it's been very destructive. When the church has affirmed the value of nature, it has often done so under the rubric of stewardship, which, although it had some positive values still, and now I quote Santmeyer, quote, presupposes that nature is to be defined essentially as the object of wise and just human use. And that's not adequate in light of all the other creatures. How then can churches develop a theopoetic language that reminds people of their place in cosmic time and thereby helps them to live in ecologically responsible ways? First Congregational United Church of Christ in Memphis helped us appreciate just how urgent the need is. Cheryl told us, quote, we are aiming to live at peace with the environment. Some of our 20-year-old members wonder if they will live out their full lives because of the eco-crisis. We talk about a need for pastoral care. You aren't going to solve this concerns of cosmic time and creaturely time intersect. At the very end, you'll see how all these come together. There are obstacles to the Church's developing an ecologically effective theopoetic. Gusen names two major problems in ritualizing nature. I'm sorry, not Gusen, but Setmeyer. Quote, Christianity is focused on human needs and aspirations, not on nature together with humanity. In the same spirit, Christianity has also frequently been captive of the modern industrial worldview shared by advocates of both Marxism and capitalism that regards nature merely as the means of production. However, I discovered a felicitous overcoming of this obstacle when I turned to the materials of Trinity Presbyterian Church, Charlotte, North Carolina, just after I had finished Gusen's book. Gusen points out, quote, it was not until the 14th century that clocks appeared in Europe, owned by the royalty and the very wealthy. So the question of the movements of the sun and moon and how to measure these movements is part and parcel of being human. So he's showing how our technology of keeping time with clocks has divorced us from something that's part and parcel of being human. So I finished reading that book, I pick up Trinity's proposal, and I read about their Arts Day camp, where the children kept time by the burning of candles, not clocks. That camp was helping those children to reclaim part and parcel of being human. No time without a clock. As a preacher, and just an aside here, I hate digital clocks, because at least in an analogical clock, you can say it's 20 of 8 or it's 7:40. You know that the present is related to the future and the past. A digital clock, it is only now. So I say that one of our major problems is we have digital existence. As a preacher and religious poet who loves science and loves the deeply biblical traditions in which I've been raised, my mother read the Bible to me every single day, never fails, starting with chapter 1, King James. We read a chapter a day. I would sit on her bed, I would wiggle, and she'd say, be still, you need Jesus. She was wrong about the still, but she was right about the Jesus. I'm aware of the enormous imaginative energies that are required to create a new theopoetic idiom of science and faith that is ecologically responsible, the very thing that the Memphis Church is working on, and that I assume drives Denton's desire to be certified as an Earth Care congregation. Michael Benson, in his book, Far Out, A Space-Time Chronicle, calls our planet, quote, this minuscule mote of oxygenated, irrigated Earth. I'll say that again. This minuscule mote of oxygenated, irrigated Earth. Now, I love the splendor of the words of the psalmist that I grew up with. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. But I live in a different cosmos. The image of this minuscule mote of oxygenated, irrigated Earth awakens in me a new theopoetic expression for hymnody. And so one strategy for developing an ecologically responsible theopoetic for the Church is to draw upon the writing of scientists and to blend it with our faith in theopoetically imaginative ways. I now want to sing a hymn that was inspired by Michael Benson's scientific writing and the Christ hymn in Colossians that was read today in worship, especially the verses declaring how in Christ all things in heaven and on earth were created, and in him all things hold together. So, as we sing this hymn, I want you to think, here I am, I'm trying to get theopoetically attentive. I'm on this little mote of earth, oxygenated earth, but I've also got Colossians rumbling around in my heart. Let's stand and sing. It has been interlined with the music. I gave you the color for it. If you want the music, the second sheet. that is perfectly understandable. One definition of the church is an organization that orders time. Sunday Mass is at 7:30, 9 o'clock, and 11 o'clock. Every December 25th, we have a celebration called Christmas. Troeger helped us see how complex this ordering of time has been in church history. She observed that the liturgical year is a mixture of the natural and the biblical. Easter is determined by the first full moon after the spring equinox. It is, as she said, a natural rhythm that fits well in the northern hemisphere, but presents problems for the southern hemisphere, especially when our resurrection images are tied to the blooming of trees, while many people south of the equator are headed into winter. Many of you in your projects found your own complexities in the ordering of time. I have gone back and read all my notes on your presentations and conversations, and the result is I have co-authored with you a little textbook entitled Ordering Time and Why It Is So Difficult. So you are the co-authors of this book. Here is the substance of it. Chapter 1, Barriers to Sabbath. Knowing what these barriers are can keep us from beating up on ourselves because of our failure to keep Sabbath. I think that's great. We want to keep Sabbath, then we fail to, so then we even take us deeper into the hole. Oh my God. I'm reading here from an article by Fred Graham from the Oxford Companion to the Mind. Quote, for most of us, our workaday lives demand continual reference to clock time and assessment of temporal duration. Only in certain occupations or during holidays can we enjoy release from the constant need to be aware of the passage of time. But more importantly, our sense of self is intimately related to the subjective awareness of the continuity of life. Any break in personal time is alarming because it suggests some disintegration of psychic synthesis. Into the quote. Dorothy Bass gives us a striking image in our readings related to this psychological insight about our obsession with time and how it's related to our identity. I love this quote of hers. Quote, a date book can become a template not simply for organizing time, but also for visualizing what time is. A sequence of little boxes, each waiting to be filled. Did you all know that kind of thing in your calendar, right? Yes. Yes. You're already checking them off. Look at that. These obsessive tendencies are only intensified by our electronic devices. In a recent article in the Yale journal Reflections, Wes Avram describes a fascinating exchange between some old-timers and a number of 20-year-olds. Quote, so they're all together. We spoke of the new normal in the upper middle class. An iPhone in one's pocket, an iPad in one's purse, and a laptop in one's bag, all syncing every 15 minutes with Facebook and Twitter. Eyes look down to laps instead of up to a teacher. Why? One of the old-timers asked. FOMO! Came the answer spontaneously from a couple of voices in their late 20s. FOMO? Came the reply right back. And with glances at each other, our young tutors responded in concert again. Fear of missing out. FOMO. Avram concludes, I tested the acronym with anyone under 30 I could find. They all knew it immediately. FOMO, fear of missing out. FOMO trumps Sabbath in our electronic culture. Of course, the irony is that lost in FOMO, folks will never be lost in wonder, love, and presence of living fully in the present moment, here and now. I'll tell you, this is actually heartbreaking stuff to me. It used to be, before everybody was plugged in, I'd come to school fairly early, I'd see a student, I'd say good morning, he'd say, oh, good morning, Professor, we'll chat. Now, this is the maximum response I get. Good morning. You just saw the maximum. Okay. Or, and this is the response I get 20 most of the time. Because they can't hear me. They're in another world. They're not present to the present. There's no here anymore. It's always somewhere else. Another barrier to Sabbath is the demon of financial success. Goosen writes, quote, the sacrament of the present moment runs counter to current Western culture in which one is so focused on the immediate future and works so hard to achieve things in the near future that one often has no time to enjoy the present moment. A linear approach to everything, especially economic achievement, has this stunning effect on one. Too busy to stop and enjoy the present moment. I don't have this in the notes, but I can't resist telling you a story. One of my preaching students had this sermon that just cracked me up. He told about, and it was about Sabbath, he told about this extremely upper echelon executive who finally had his 2 weeks off and had gone to the Caribbean for fishing. And every day he went out with this fisherman who ran a business. And this fisherman was really sharp. He was obviously a very gifted guy. And the executive said, you know, could I get you to come up north? And, you know, I have no doubt at all you would really rise through the ranks and everything. And the guy says, and what? And then I could have 2 weeks fishing here. He said, how about a year? Leslie confirmed that this is indeed the case about this pushing and pushing for many of the members of Second Presbyterian Church in New York City. Quote, there is no such thing as go out and play. If you're not laid off, you have to work double time. Because of that pressurized pattern, it is difficult to claim the gift for which the church hungers. Quote again, we need Sabbath. We need to unplug and connect more quietly to each other. End of quote. Craig from Trinity Presbyterian Church in Denton gave us a concise but psychologically sophisticated understanding of how this drive for achievement grips our own being. I thought this was a great insight, Craig. Quote, we judge other people on the basis of what they produce, and then we internalize that standard of judgment upon ourselves. These are all strong barriers to keeping Sabbath. They require from the church adroit pastoral care, a sensitivity to just how tangled our souls are. The apostolic letter, which we read in advance of the conference, Deus Domini by John Paul II, reminds us why it is worth the effort it takes to get to Sabbath. And I quote the Pope. Sabbath recalls that the universe and history belong to God. And without a constant awareness of that truth, humanity cannot serve in the world as co-worker of the Creator. It's that we want to get that constant awareness going in people. And that little homily I actually did do for Thanksgiving dinner on a Thanksgiving day. And for years afterwards, I heard people say, every time when I start the Thanksgiving dinner, I imagine all that stuff going back to the Big Bang. So I was trying to do what the Pope's talking about, create this constant awareness. As the opening stanza of one hymn puts it, unless this day be holy, all days shall blur to one, as orderly but empty they march from sun to sun. But if we keep the Sabbath through prayer and song and praise, we'll find the sacred meaning in all our working days. We all need to hear the wisdom of Craig's father, who told his son when he claimed to have no time to make a family reunion, there is always time for what is important. And I remember it was quite a and a group. Chapter 2 in the little textbook we have co-authored, Ordering Time and Why It Is So Difficult, observes how the structures we give to time refuse to stay in place. I think here are 3 related stories from 3 churches, each of them hundreds of miles apart geographically, but all caught in the same cross-generational crunch. Trinity Presbyterian in Charlotte, North Carolina. Quote, the church has a lot of meaning for the 70 to 80 years old, but the middle-aged need another way of being. End of quote. Trinity Episcopal, New Haven. A service that once was popular now has become, quote, more an ingrown toenail than a rose. It served a definite time and place. It worked for a while, but in the 90s started a precipitous decline. I'll tell you, ingrown toenail there is a memorable feel.
Got a song for that yet?
No, I'll get to work on it. And at First United Methodist in Evanston, Illinois, quote, we are now at a time when we need to form ourselves for the next generation. All 3 churches have to deal with Maggie Dawn's great question. How are we to be faithful to tradition without getting stuck in traditionalism. All of that was present here. Chapter 3 of Order and Time and Why It Is So Difficult is titled Individuals, Their Cultures and Circumstances Order Time Differently. If you doubt this, I invite you to take your seat in a pew in Lake Chelan Lutheran Church and see how different people order the time given to worship. Quote, people who like to talk among themselves during the entire service sit in left rear. Those who like to heckle the pastor, center left. Farmers and orchards, right rear. Children who dance, center on. People who use medical marijuana and smell like it, last row right. Lake Chelan has, how do you say that? Chelan, thank you. Lake Chelan has discovered that the disorder of ordered time keeps flooding into their project to minister to the dying. Quote, it's not as simple as we thought. When we say the dying, to whom exactly are we referring? End of the quote. How do you provide order to the unordered messiness of dying, from slow dying to unexpected death, to death fervently prayed for, and death self-inflicted? Sometimes it is not people, but physical space that reorders time. Jackie told us there was a time when the Church of St. Francis Xavier had, quote, so much soot the church looked like Good Friday all year long. What is the feeling tone of the space that shapes our experience of how time is ordered? It's difficult to celebrate Easter when the building proclaims death. In addition to all these things, different cultures order time differently. Dean reports that his African-American congregants love it when he breaks into song in a sermon, but are baffled why he preaches only 15 minutes, which to them feels like he's just warming up. But others, from other cultures, do not want him to disrupt his sermons with song, and 15 minutes is plenty long enough for any sermon as far as they're concerned. These cultural differences extend into different liturgical practices. Contrast, for example, a comment by Rita and one by Shirley. Rita, speaking about the power and beauty of the liturgical year, told us, quote, my maternal grandmother interwove every common act of the liturgical year. She made the sign of the cross over a loaf of bread before it went in the oven. She once stopped my mother from doing the wash because it was the day dedicated to the Lady of the Snows. And then came Rita's acute summation, quote, we have our lives, but the liturgical year reminds us we are a part of something much bigger, end of quote. Cheryl from Memphis provides an intriguing contrast to Rita's affectionate memories. Quote, the liturgical year must not become another loop to jump through, end of quote. There are different ecclesial cultures, different values, different perceptions of how time is to be ordered. And this still does not exhaust the list. There are different voices inside ourselves, giving us conflicted signals about how to order time. Don Saliers put it this way, quote, our tropism is to go after immediacy. Our deeper desire is to be formed in a way that allows us to be grasped by a passion that takes us over time. The Church of St. Francis Xavier confirms Don's insight. They hope to participate in the evaluation of a new translation of the Missal, and you can hear them wanting to say no to the tropism of immediacy and yes to being formed by a passion that takes them over time. They are, quote, especially interested in trying various musical settings that have a longer shelf life than the up-and-down pseudo-chant found in Liber Usalis. We also hear this desire to being formed by passion over time in Lake Chelan, as Wendy insists on the place of beauty in the ordering of time. She says of the liturgical resources they hope to produce for the dying, quote, the book must be beautiful. The need is to touch something that conveys the holy, a beauty rich with the weight of sacred wonder. Chapter 4 of Order and Time and Why It Is So Difficult is titled Yielding Ourselves to Ordered Time. Despite all of these human complexities, ordered time still manages to connect us with the one who is even greater than cosmic time. Santmeyer, in Ritualizing Nature, writes, quote, the hands that hold bread and cup are the hands that hold the center of the universe. As that center now is moving through time-space, to the alpha of the universe, to its omega. William Blake's words could then be taken with a new seriousness in a way that he more than likely never intended them to be. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand. Bread and cup move us beyond verbal language, and so I will end these reflections on ordered time with music, pure music. For as Rowan Williams observes in the little homily we read before the conference, quote, "To listen seriously to music and to perform it are among our most potent ways of learning what it is to live with and before God, learning a service that is perfect freedom. We choose to yield something of ourselves, a portion of our time, a period of our life. No one forces this. No one and nothing can compel our contemplation except the object in its own right." At the end of this brief movement from a Marcello flute sonata, I ask you to keep silence and let whatever wordless motions have been set free in your heart continue as you listen for the spirit that prays and sighs too deep for words. And at the conclusion of the silence, we will finish by looking at creaturely time. So now I turn to creaturely time. Creaturely time is breathing time. Creaturely time is heart-beating time. Every one of the projects engages creaturely time because every project will be carried out by human creatures who live so many years and then die. All things of dust to dust return on earth and in the sky. The hottest, brightest suns that burn in time grow dim and die. The fish that leap, the birds that soar, the newborn young that play, the leaves that fill the forest floor, revert to dust and clay. Although every project engages creaturely time, the project that particularly features creaturely time is from Lake Chellan Lutheran Church. I want to consider one of their stories in particular. I believe the name was Mallory. Mallory had the cancer, right? Paul told us about. Quote, the catechumenate process before her cancer helped her understand her situation in terms of life and the presence of death. End of the quote. This story discloses something profoundly important. The story reveals that the human understanding of creaturely time does not come to us any more automatically than our understanding of cosmic time and ordered time. Mallory had to go through the catechumenate to be ready. It takes teaching. You might think, well, we know what it is to be a creature, but we don't know what it is to be a creature. That's why the psalmist says to us, it's the Lord who has made us, and not we ourselves. Because we constantly forget. We need to be educated in creaturely time. Like those boys Paul took to see the congregation member dying from Parkinson's, and that boy kissed him. We need to learn why the finitude of creaturely time, is a gift and not a terror. And here I call in one of my favorite Roman Catholic theologians, Karl Reiner. He writes, quote, if time were capable of being extended indefinitely, it would become hell, in the sense that it would be a meaningless void. No moment would have any value because it would always be impossible to postpone and put off everything endlessly to a future that was infinite, and so never made actual. Nothing would ever be too late for us. There would always be enough. And on this hypothesis, everything would fall into the void of absolute indifference, where it would have no value. I think it's a brilliant quote. You can get it offline. Finitude awakens gratitude for the grace of being. And to help develop a field poetic for this, I'm going to preach one more very brief homily, and then we'll sing a final hymn, and then I'll give you directions for your work. Bang, 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 bang. The sound was very persistent, but I didn't know where it was coming from or really what was going on. Bang, 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 bang. Oh, and then all of a sudden it came to me. I was in the ICU, the intensive care unit, recovering from an operation. And you know how groggy you are when you first come out of general anesthesia. And I remember that the day before, Marie had been driving me to the hospital, and they were driving piles to put an addition on the hospital. Bang, 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 bang. Well, with all the holiness I could muster, I said, God, shut that thing off! Bang, bang. And then all of a sudden I remembered, no, the surgeon had said to me, when you first wake up, this artificial heart valve is going to sound very loud. Cancel that prayer! Shut that thing off! Now, so you can get in on this, sir. I want you to take your hand, right or left hand. The human heart is about as big as a human hand. Okay? Now, on the average, a human heart beats 100,000 times a day. So let's get our hearts going, okay? Getting tired yet? Don't stop. This is your heart. You can stop. 100,000 times a day. That means in 1 week, your heart beats 700,000 times. You multiply that by 10 weeks, 7 million times. Now multiply that by 5 to get toward it here, 50 weeks, 5 times 7, 35 million times. We have 2 weeks to go, and we haven't allowed for your jogging or chasing the cat. So in round figures, your heart beats 40 million times a year. So by the time you're 10, it's beat 400 million times. By the time you're 20, 800 million. By the time you are 30, 1,200,000,000. I am way past 2,400,000,000. never received a card in the mail or something on my email saying, dear Professor Troeger, you are 67 years in arrears on your heartbeat payments. Pay up now or we're shutting off service. To exist is grace. To live is a gift. And when you know that in every cell of your being, then cosmic time and order time and creaturely time all converge in the act of giving everlasting praise to God. Let's stand and sing each breath is borrowed there. might have learned from faculty or from these beautiful worship services that people have led us in. And then the third and final one is something you learn from doing your presentation and hearing the response of the group. Now, the way we'd like to do this is we're going to leave this room because this is it's a nice room, but it's not so good for conversation. You can go up to the common room and sit at tables. That way you can see each other and have really nice conversation, and you can easily make notes. Here's what I'm going to suggest, is that you go up and that you take at least a minute or two in silence just to write down phrases or whatever that will remind you what you want to talk about with the group. For this group, do not sit with the members of your team. Sit with members from other teams, okay? Because later this afternoon, you're going to get to work on your own projects together. But this way, you'll be able to draw upon the wisdom and learning from the other groups. And I think that's very important relative to the process we've been through. And then lunch will be coming out, and feel free to get up and have lunch. If you want to continue talking about it over lunch, fine. If you want to chat about other things, that's fine. But I think this will give us a nice, relaxed, different mode of being, okay? So thank you all for